What's good, everybody? It's your man Big Dom coming live and at you on the TruPlayaz podcast episode, hitting you with the in-your-face, unedited, straight, blunt talk about sports, finances, relationships, current events, and many other topics along the way. Check out my next episode. Big Dom coming live at you on the TruPlayaz podcast episode on our 6-year anniversary episode series. And we got returning Marz from the Down the Den podcast, Down the Den Studios, Marz Studios. We got him back on the podcast for part 2. I also got a special guest. His name is Cameron Lee Cowan, creative director of the Cameron Journal. We're going to talk about some politics today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to have him on the show with his expertise on politics. I guarantee you it's going to be a great podcast today. All right. Let them introduce themselves to the people. Marz, do your thing.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Don, man, thank you again for having me back. Cam, brother, good to see you again. As you know, I'm Marz down in the Den, DITD Studios. Have a embarrassment of riches of fantastic entertainment over on our YouTube channel. So do me a favor, while you're looking at this, when you're done, go ahead and go on YouTube, type in Down in the Den. We have shows about politics. We have shows about music. We have shows about life. We have shows about pro wrestling, everything that you need. And of course, you can listen to the audio on every platform that you listen to podcasts. So we appreciate the continued patronage. We're going on 5 years now. So, it's been an incredible journey. And through that journey, I've met some of these great genius gentlemen in the podcasting field. So I'm just happy to be back and happy to talk about the, potential destruction of our country. So we'll see.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Marz. Cameron, do your thing, my man.
Hey everyone, my name is Cameron Cowan. I'm creative director at the Cameron Journal. I do research and insights on culture. The world is complicated, but this is not, is our slogan at the Cameron Journal. I like to break down the very complicated into the very simple, so you can be smarter than your friends. We have, I don't have multiple shows like Marz does. I just have a volume of content. So we have new interviews every Monday, and something new for you to read on the website almost every day across business, politics, culture, and life. And I do have my next 2 books coming out in the fall. One is a reissue of my book, What the Hell is Going On?, which is a guide to everything from racism to genetically modified foods. And then my very, very new book, America's Lost Generation, about millennials born between 1986 and 1991 through the lens of a comparable crisis in Japan in 1991, when all of us were toddlers. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about this debate and everything. I was live streaming during the debate, so when you go to the YouTube channel, if you want to see my live reaction to that whole mess, it's available. You can watch my mental breakdown on camera in real time. So I'm excited here to talk about this and get everybody's thoughts and maybe put a few people at ease.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Cameron. Definitely, he's gonna keep you guys at ease because I need to be at ease right now because I'm worried for the future of our country. We have 2 men who I feel who are not prepared to take over the reins of this country. Um, it's very sad because in my many years of living in this world, I'm not going to expose my age here, guys. However, I've never met such dysfunction in the White House. We going on 8 years of consistent dysfunction. If you don't mind what I'm saying, if you don't understand what I'm saying, I'm saying sheer facts, sheer dysfunction. I may get a call from an unknown caller in a few minutes, but the debate between these two gentlemen Trump is still Trump. And Joe is still sleeping. I don't know what to tell you. Guys, fill me in. Fill me in. It's just like,
Okay, please, I'll let you go first, brother.
Well, one of the things going into this debate that I always kind of think it's important to remember is America did not want either of these two. Okay. Biden never had that tremendous support in the Democratic Party, much less the country. We just didn't like the other guy. And I think he knows that. I think if you caught him in an honest moment, he would be honest and tell you he realizes how he won. And even Trump, as popular as he is, this is a man who has lost primaries to Nikki Haley, hasn't been running for president for 3 months and still wins primaries 45% of the vote. If he's smart, he'll appoint her vice president because she has almost as many delegates as he does in the Republican Party. But in the early election polling late last year into early this year, the Americans were looking for something else, another option. There's a reason RFK is polling consistently at 11%, that's Ross Perot 1992 numbers. I mean, that's to reach far back. Let me go all the way back 30 years to bring that one forward. That's Ross Perot numbers. And he's nuts. He's
in his brain.
Yeah, he's a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. This is not the rematch anybody wanted on either side. There's a lot of neither of these voters in this country. And so right now we're stuck between two choices that no one asked for, no one wanted, a handful of people only really support. And we're trying to figure out, how best to get us through these times. And it is tough times. The post-pandemic environment has been extremely tough. And I, speaking as a business owner, inflation high, cost of everything high, interest rates has risen, borrowing costs for businesses, which means businesses are spending less money, which is not great for those of us that do businesses with other businesses, B2B. It's not even great for B2C because with inflation high, people are cutting back spending elsewhere. So if you're selling non-essentials, that money is not flowing the way it used to. And so we're leaving a decade of cheap, almost free money from the Fed. We have the post-pandemic environment. We have a major reshuffling happening globally. A lot of industry is coming back, which is great for jobs. Unfortunately, it means everything's going to be more expensive as labor costs are higher. The age of everything cheap made in China is coming to an end. And in some industries, it's basically over. And so now it's cheap made elsewhere in Southeast Asia or cheap made in Mexico. And so no matter where you look, you kind of have all these issues. And so we're looking for someone to kind of help solve these problems. And then on top of that story, we then layer this extremely toxic culture war where things like diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI is basically the new N-word. And you see this all the time. If anybody is in a position of power or hired and they're brown, they must have been a DEI hire because no brown person could ever get a job legitimately. I read a post this morning about someone saying that about Vice President Harris, all this type of thing. And so we kind of have these two moving plates, and when else we get into Project 2025 and all that sort of thing of the and the post-Roe world, and so we have many problems, and our solutions are two 80-year-olds, neither of whom speak that consistently, one of whom bumbled his way through a 90-minute national television debate, trying to fight Trump with facts and figures, which never works, which it took him a half hour of the debate to figure out, even though we've known it for years. And unfortunately, in this moment, sadly, if we want to continue small r Republican democracy, the sleepy one is our best bet, because Trump has laid out and his party have laid out their plans quite clearly that small r Republican democracy is not going to continue under their leadership. They're not interested in being out of power ever again. And they've already accomplished this at the state level. In Wisconsin, they gerrymandered their state legislature map so bad they made it so that the Democratic Party would never have a majority ever again. And they had to have it overturned in federal court. North Carolina hasn't had a congressional map not written by courts in 15 years because the fight is so fierce. So this is really a manifestation of 20 years of Republicans strategizing to basically lock progress out of power. And I also think there's people interested in that because there's a strong desire for some sort of return to normalcy. And I said this on Marz's show on Friday night. This is our new normal, everybody. We're not going back to 2019. It's not possible. This is where we're at. This is what we've got. We have to learn how to live with this. And that's a very difficult thing to, I think, to do, to comprehend for people, to deal with. And so I was impressed at how Joe pulled it together at the end of the debate. He was better in the back half than he was in the first half. But as someone who works in media, I know that everyone's going to watch the first 10, maybe 20 minutes, and that was the worst. I mean, I mean, my head was in my hands on my stream. Like, you can go watch. I was visibly like, oh God, this isn't good. And so the optics were terrible. I do find what's interesting though, and I was just having this conversation with someone because that night my phone exploded. I had every left Democrat friend calling me, oh God, hair on fire, we need a new nominee, all this type of thing. I mean, morning Joe and Mika were apoplectic the following morning, all this type of thing. My phone's going up too. But I had this conversation. I said, here's what's interesting. We've had a week of polling data out now, and people really don't care. Interestingly enough, there was some, kind of Vox Populi feedback that night of people not really caring. And I find it interesting that, given the polls, Biden's still within the margin of error. He's ahead in every swing state except Pennsylvania, including Nevada and Georgia and places like that. And so I think really, interestingly enough, the bad debate performance narrative is really a media narrative. We don't really see it in the numbers. We don't really see it with people. Even in the comments on social media, it was a meme for maybe a couple days, but even the memes have already dropped off. The weird comments have already dropped off. I just think in some level people just kind of don't care. But I think it's interesting, and I said this to Marz on Friday night. I said, the debate was last week, and I'm on your show talking about it. And I'm here on Sunday, on my day off, talking to you about it. And I think that's interesting. That, so you kind of wonder, how deep does that panic and worry go? How far does that go? Why isn't it showing up in the polling data? Or are people just being like, yeah, he's a bit of a bumbler, but he's our guy. I mean, maybe that's what's going on. I mean, again, give me your thoughts on this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I watch debate, and like you, I know we live in the ADHD generation. Everybody has about 30 seconds of attention span before they pull off. And the biggest thing with me, and I watched the entire debate through and through, Trump got worse as it went on.
Mm-hmm.
Biden got better. But the minds had already been made. As you mentioned, the media headlines had already been written. And we saw for the first couple of days after, there was serious conversation. Okay, who's going to be the new candidate? I've never seen anything like that where we're this close to the presidential election and we're talking about, hey, can we switch the candidate? Can we get someone else? I also believe 80% of the people, maybe more, they're going to vote for who they're going to vote. There's nothing that Trump can say. There's nothing that Biden can say. Biden could come up there and say, I have the cure for cancer. And those Trump voters are going to be like, okay, I'm still voting for Trump. And on the reverse end, Trump could say, I'm going to give everyone cancer. And people will be like, okay, I'm still voting for Trump. It doesn't really matter to people who have their mind set. My biggest takeaway is just how far the office of the president, the most powerful position in the world, has fallen. Neither one of these men would qualify 20 years ago. They wouldn't even be considered to be on anybody's choice to be the president. One, because they're both literally a heartbeat away from death. As you mentioned, we have a gentleman who's in his early 80s and another gentleman who's not knocking on 80's door. And it's simply horrifying. The fact that you have the one thing I will give the Republicans, because I've always been taught to respect your enemy. They stick by their candidate. You have a guy who's been impeached twice, who's got tons of allegations and charges, who's been convicted of multiple felonies, and they stick by him. And Joe gets a little sleepy during the debate, and they're ready to switch. And that's one of the reasons I fear, because the Republicans, they stick together. They're going to stick beside him no matter what, no matter if it's a detriment to the country and the world. They're going to stick beside him. So we're it doesn't matter what they say when it comes to actually policy achievements or future plans for the country. They could highlight Biden's accomplishments in the first term, infrastructure investments, COVID-19 response, climate policies. You can highlight that. It doesn't matter because no one actually listens or reads the policy. And I'm hoping that at the end of the day, for our democracy, that regardless of the twists and turns that we have from now until the next debate in September, we still realize that this is a situation where it's not the lesser evil, it's actually the survival of our democracy. And I truly, if you really are out there, it's about 400 pages. Please, please just look at that first day 2025 Project 2025 plan. Just highlight it and look at what they're taking. If you're someone like me that has elder retired parents, they're trying to cut Social Security. These are things that we need to survive. So either way, the country's got a lot of recovery to do. I agree with Cam. The pre 2019 is done, but we can mitigate some of the damages that are going to the country if you vote Biden on this election. Not that I'm a fan of him, trust me. He's probably my least favorite Democrat out there, but it's the alternative. The alternative is scary. So that's what I took away from the debate.
The alternative is really scary, and they already set up certain things in case Trump does become president. Basically reinstituted the draft, the military draft, right under our nose, while we're distracted by Diddy and all his shenanigans that's going on. The things that too many people are asleep and need to wake up and see what's going on. My question to you guys is, who's the next rising star? I mean, they're talking about replacing Biden, but who's the next rising star for the Democrats?
Well, this gets into the Kamala Harris problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, in all the people that have been talked about, and there have been several names: Gavin Newsom of California, Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan is a big favorite. Pete Buttigieg, who managed to parlay being a 3-term mayor of Indiana's third largest town into being transportation secretary. Impressive. And former McKinsey consultant. His name has been mentioned because obviously he's running in 2016. In 2020, I'm sorry. And so there's, so those are kind of the names that are being thrown around. It's very obvious Gavin Newsom wants to run in 2028. That's why he did that debate with Ron DeSantis. And he cleaned Ron DeSantis' clock, by the way. Ron DeSantis withered under Gavin Newsom. But unfortunately with Gavin, you get the California baggage, homelessness, housing crisis, water crisis, all of these problems, all these, it needs to become national stories and right-wing talking points, by the way. And the right wing's made a big deal about people moving out of California because, it's California sort of thing, and California definitely has a management issue and has had one since at least Jerry Brown, the first time he was in office. And so there's, those are kind of the names that are being, but I mean, the names are being passed around, but the Democrat bench isn't that deep right now. A lot of the people who ran in 2016 or in 2020, aren't necessarily big national figures who galvanized on support. Looking at you, Amy Klobuchar, looking at you, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders was the only one that had any type of real national support, but the man is older than our 2 president candidates and had a heart attack. So that's the end of that. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely, however this ends, say Biden wins in November and we're looking for candidates in 2027, we're going to be looking around real difficult, at who might run. And there's going to be, because she's vice president now, and if they win in November, she'll have been vice president for 8 years. There will be a lot of people. The K Hive is very vocal on social media. They will be very much pushing to run Kamala Harris. There's only one problem. No one likes her. She has, black people don't like her. She can't win black, and you don't get the nomination of the Democratic Party without that. Then Kemp doesn't like her. Her approval ratings are in the basement. They're not to be cared about, really. They're so low. And near as I can tell, based upon her speaking, she's only figured out how to be vice president about 6 months ago. And there's already talk now about saying, oh, we should solve Biden and have her be the top of the ticket. And I said, well, that guarantees a Trump win. I'm kind of like, yeah, and so somebody would say, it's like, will America vote for a woman? Yes. In 2016, Hillary won the majority of the vote. Most Americans pulled the lever and said, yes, we'll have a woman president. I'm sorry, this is America. This is a woman of color. Have you met our country? Like, how are you going to sell that in Kansas? Let me know. How are you going to sell that in Oklahoma? Like, especially, I'm from out west. Around here, it's not that big of a thing, but I'm from out west. Please tell me how you're going to sell that in Montana or the Dakotas. Good luck. Good luck. Tell me how you're going to hawk that in Arkansas and Mississippi. Let me know. I'm excited to hear your strategy. It's just not going to work. And that's not necessarily a knock against her. It's a very different thing to go from Attorney General of California to senator, and she didn't serve a full term. She was only in there for 4 years of 6, to then being vice president. And in the Senate, because she was able to ask questions and get national attention, that was very similar to being a prosecutor. It suited her skills. Being a national politician who frequently has to step in for the president and the head of state is a completely different skill set. And she did not have it for the first 3 years they were in office. And it showed that she didn't have it. And she's just kind of figured it out. And it's funny because every time she's not in the public eye, her approval ratings go up. The minute she starts putting herself out there, they start to go down. So in my mind, she's not really viable. But the reality is you're going to have a small riot on your hand in the Democratic Party if you pass her over for someone else. And that's even going to be a problem in 2027, if we are able to continue democracy in this country in any form. There's going to be a big movement to say, yes, we need to have her because she's the next logical choice sort of thing. And it's a bit of a non-starter. So yeah, the bench is not that deep. And I've told people all week long, because everyone was calling, and I had people texting me all these different potential, tickets and all this type of thing. And I said, look, the decision for swapping out Biden was made last summer. And they came out and said that he was going to run again. I think a lot of people feel lied to about his mental health condition or health condition writ large. And I think that's where a lot of the anger comes from, especially from Democrats. But the reality is, this is not 1976. This is not going into the convention with no candidate like they did to find Jimmy Carter. No one knew who Jimmy Carter was in 76, by the way. Nobody knew who he was. He was the governor of Georgia. Nobody knew who he was. He had no national attention. And he suddenly becomes the consensus candidate at the DNC in 76. And that's how he gets in and wins. And then promptly loses 4 years later to Ronald Reagan. And so there's, it is a difficult thing. I think, like it or not, this is who our chariot is hitched to, for the time being anyway. And we're definitely going to have to be looking for new, fresh faces. And we do need new, fresh faces later on. But the GOP is not doing any better either. They've kicked everybody who doesn't support Trump out of the party, basically. If you are a never Trumper, not Trump, moderate Republican, you have been sent out. Electeds, rank and file. I mean, they've kicked pretty much every non-Trump person out of the GOP. And so their bench is light simply because, they've got rid of everybody, who really could do something. And so you're in this kind of awkward situation where we kind of have a bit of a crisis of leadership. And so in my mind, that's an opening for, another Trump, and whoever decides to try to take up the Trump mantle and continues forward with Trumpism as a philosophy, as a way of governing, will be by their very nature much worse. Trump is a bit daft, but he's fairly benign, all things being told. Whoever takes up his mantle won't be. I guarantee you that. And look no further than Project 2025 and all that sort of thing as proof of that. They will be worse, sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's a very difficult thing. We really have a crisis of leadership. Honestly, there's not an easy person to slot in, either now or 4 years from now, on either side. And I think this is partly what happens when the older generation hangs on to power for too long. Is you don't, when you do that, you don't raise up that next generation. And the reality is the boomers have been in power for a very, very long time. I mean, we elected someone who was born during World War II to be president in the year of our Lord 2020. I mean, that's because Biden was born in 43. So they've been in power for far too long, and it's really time for that next generation to come to the fore. And we're going to find out what that looks like here very soon, because the older generation is passing on finally. And so we're going to see what that looks like. But we're going to have a real crisis of leadership moving forward, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would. You asked who's the next shining star. There is no shining star. I can tell you who's not a shining star. And the problem, as Cam so eloquently highlighted, these middle America states, they're they're not going to get behind Pete Buttigieg. He's gay. I don't
Yeah.
find anything personally wrong with it, but they do. They're not going to get around to Hillary had Clinton as a last name, and I think that's why she got the majority of the votes. But you still saw those swing states. They're not ready to have a woman as leadership because they look at women as a second class citizen. AOC, she's a spicy Latina. No way that they're gonna give her any type of um, play. She's a woman. She's young and she serves drinks at the bar like Coyote Ugly. There are no stars on either side. You look at the governor of Florida, who I'm having a brain fart right
Ron
now.
DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis, one of the biggest dummies in the world, literally one of the biggest dummies in the world. The fact that any of these Republicans couldn't beat Trump, where this man has all of these felonies. He literally, I just saw an article. Now they're talking about sexual abuse charges. He's all over that. He's literally the Teflon Don. There are no stars. The days of the Bill Clinton going on the Centennial Hall and playing the saxophone, or Barack Obama aspiring people with very little policy experience but hope and he's a smooth talker, those days are gone. Right now, we don't have anyone on either side. The crisis of leadership isn't coming, it's already here. The fact that we are having a rematch of Donald Trump and Joe Biden shows the crisis is already here. Unfortunately, one crisis on Biden's side is something we can survive. And I think if you take any way from this episode, the other crisis is one that we will not as a democracy. So it's a spoonful of sugar. You have to take your medicine, vote left. But I don't see any stars right now. Honestly, it's all about popularity because Trump has lowered the bar so much. You don't even have to be smart anymore. You used to at least have to be smart. That I guarantee you, if The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, ran for president, he would beat both of these guys because
Yeah.
he's popular. Beat both of these guys by a landslide. And he would appeal to both sides because he's machismo enough, he's racially ambiguous, he can speak, he's made some crappy movies, but he would beat both of these guys with zero political experience. Unfortunately, I feel the presidency is the next reality show. It's the next real world. And that's going to be the future. As long as Trumpism is a thing, that's going to be the future for the country. And we need to get back to actually looking at policy, having people experience. I always said I don't want to be smarter than my president. And if I am, that's a damn problem. And right now, even though I do feel Biden is a fairly intelligent, no, I'm not going to go that far. but I'm going to say he has a conscience, and really, that's the best we can ask for at this time. It's just a man that's somewhat of a good man, and I do feel, even though Biden is definitely in the past had some things with integrity, plagiarism, things with just flat out lying about where he was in his class. That was in the past, and of course, his it's hard to overlook the what he did to the black community as far as prison. At the end of the day, I still feel he's somewhat of a good man. And really, at this point, that's all we can ask for. This is like, are you a good man or woman? That until this younger generation, this TikTok generation, grows up and actually takes some interest, and unfortunately, for them to do that, we might have to see the dark side. I don't know if anybody is Star Wars fans, but I'm getting real Emperor Palpatine vibes.
Well, we're very long way away from that. I mean, it's the next two generations to really take political leadership in this country. It would be Gen X and Millennials. I doubt Gen X will engage. They never have. Well, they're not going to start now. In their 50s and 60s, I don't think that's going to happen. Um, and so really the next group of people ready to kind of take charge are millennials who've always been very apathetic about government and democracy anyway. And I think that comes from 9/11, Iraq War protests, growing up in the Bush years. A lot of us came of age in the Bush years. Um, and then the great financial crisis. We gave banks $700 billion in less than a week. We did not we did not fix a single rate on a mortgage. We didn't save any. And there are millennials whose parents will have lost their houses, and that was a traumatic event. For those of us that graduated college during that time, we are still remember how hard it was to find a job. Our careers and our earning power are still down. Millennials control we're the largest generation by number. We control 4% of wealth, and 2% of that is Mark Zuckerberg himself.
Yeah, most
Which
people are
and
able.
that's the thing is, running for office takes money, it takes capital, it takes time. We don't got it. Like, that's, and the ones like, we just don't we can't. And I was in a thread, people were saying, oh, you need to start running stuff, and everyone said, I can't afford to run, like, how can I do that? I can't afford, seed money to buy one sign to go, or to take time off to go to one meeting, to even start the process of getting the support and the influence, all that type of thing, to make that happen. And there's, people like AOC or some other, really intrepid people, have really done that and try to do that, but progress on that has been, painstakingly slow. And so I agree with you, Marz. We do have a crisis of leadership now, and it's only going to get worse as time goes on. Which, to bring the conversation full circle, in a weird, funny way, I could see that suddenly making Vice President Harris a viable option. If they win again in November and we're having this conversation in 2027 and 2028, and you're stuck between her and Gavin Newsom and maybe Gretchen Whitmer or Jared Polis of Colorado or Jay Inslee of Washington, in that group, all of a sudden, she's the most experienced person in the room. And then all of a sudden, it might make sense. And I think the DNC would try it, just to, to sort of, I mean, you can see scenarios where we live in strange times where a lack of this and not that all of a sudden starts to make unlikely people who really shouldn't have these jobs. Not saying she doesn't belong there, but I would worry for her being president, given what I've seen. All of a sudden makes the most unlikely people, unlikely people suddenly viable candidates. I mean, I was watching Designing Women the other day, and it's a great episode where Julia calls Donald Trump and yells at him about not wanting to hear about his dating or marriages, all this type of thing. And I said, my God, if you told us in 1992 that someone who's getting roasted by Dixie Carter on a network television show is going to be president, we would have laughed in your face. And it's kind of like remember The Apprentice? That guy, we liked him so much, we decided to give him actual political power in this country for 4 years. That was, sort of thing. I mean, it's just, we live in strange times. Expect the unexpected, really and truly.
And Mr. Beast, he says if they lower the age, he'll throw his hat, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I saw that this morning. I about threw my phone. I
You would be surprised.
if I could pay a subscription to have all of his posts and any mention of him deleted from all of my social media for the rest of my life, I would not eat. I would not have gas. I would let my power get shut off. But I would pay that subscription so that I never have to look at him, his face, his stupid smile ever again. I don't know why he's popular. I don't understand the appeal. He's a generic white dude who's not even good looking that does stuff. Sir, you should be at home collecting Pokemon cards, masturbating to anime, and playing video games, preferably in that order. Why on earth do you have money, power, attention, all this type of thing? He's he's an idiot. I mean, genuinely, like in another day and time, we would have diagnosed him with imbecility and warehoused him in an asylum where, quite frankly, he belongs. Like, I don't understand. And 35 is low enough, by the way. We
Yeah.
don't need people under 30 trying to run the country. Like, if you want to find out what that might look like, go watch Veep. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is a brilliant actress. She will show you how much insanity can ensue in that environment. And if I have to see his face on TV every day trying to tell me about the war in Ukraine, that's me out of the country, and I will disappear and unplug everything, and you will never see or hear from me ever again, because that's not that can't be a thing. That
Those
can't be a thing.
subpar cheeseburgers all across the globe. So I mean, we can look forward to that.
Your taxpayer dollars at work.
This has been entertaining, guys, definitely. But I do have two. I do have a question here. We mentioned that we should have an age limit on the lower side, like the 30s, to become president. How about putting a limit on how old a president can be to run for president? Because in Joe Biden's case, his health is a scare for a lot of us. Consider what he has in the background.
I've always been a fan of term limits and most definitely age limits. As I mentioned before we started recording, in my 9 to 5, I've worked in the insurance industry for over 20 years. And unfortunately, I've taken the calls from Papa, who's unfortunately backed into a FedEx truck because he just didn't turn around. You know, the fact of the matter is, I've had family that suffer from dementia, Alzheimer's. Not saying that Joe Biden is suffering from anything, but we all know we're all over 30. Your body starts breaking down after a certain age. The check engine light starts coming on, and the more stress you have, is scientifically proven, the more it can be detrimental to your health. And what's more stressful than the president and the leader of the free world? I've said this before on a recent episode with Cam, and I've said it again. Every single person that stepped into that office has aged like spoiled milk when they get out of it. From George Bush, from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama, we've seen what these 3.5 years have done to Joe Biden. 2019 Joe and 2024 Joe might as well be two separate people, except for one man, and that's Donald Trump, because he did nothing. And we survived as a country because he did nothing besides cut taxes and fatten his pocket. But now there's plans in place. They realize that, hey, this is our last shot to really shape the world in the image of white supremacy. And at the end of the day, it's Trump's two calling cards should be more money for the rich and white supremacy. And I personally don't even believe Donald Trump himself is a white supremacist. I think he just is a Trump supremacist. And anything that gets him, if they told him, walk around with a BLM shirt and you're guaranteed to win and you won't go to prison, tomorrow Trump would be out there, brother, brother, brother. That's who he is. He's playing the game. That's my side. And unfortunately, and because I have said this before, if you're a racist, you're an idiot. The idiots eat it up. And he knows they're idiots. He's an idiot himself, but he knows they're even more uh, on the imbecile scale. And you see them now out there in khakis walking on bridges with masks on. I didn't expect this in 2024. I'm still waiting for my flying car. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I'm thinking we would have world peace, the end of hunger, and flying cars right now, and I'm still seeing the same '88 Corolla that was out there back then because no one could afford to buy a new
Yeah.
car. This is the
Yeah.
reality we've set for ourselves when we put the foolish notion of white supremacy as the notion in Christianity, and it's nothing against Christians. I'm not taking a shot at Christians at all, but it has no place in politics, especially in a country that's supposed to be about religious freedom and about the people and melting. That is not what this country was on paper designed on. Now we all know in reality they were all about just doing their thing, but on paper the notion of the American democracy is a beautiful experiment. But unfortunately, when they see their numbers dwindling, that's why we have the reversal of Roe versus Wade. They see their numbers dwindling. Everyone says, but I believe 2040, 2050, they'll be, no longer in the majority. This is the final grasp of white supremacy trying to hold on to its power. And we just have to stand up. Please, please go out there and vote. I'm going to end every question with it. Please go out there and vote left, or just don't vote right. if you don't, if you're apathetic and you don't want to vote, just at least don't vote Trump, because at the end of the day, that is the final, in my opinion, the final grasp of white supremacy in this nation. And it's not just from a POC. This is from a human being, from a person who has immediate family that are LGBTQIA, a person that has immediate family that have religious freedoms, and I see that in danger. It worries me. And so ultimately, we just got to, hold on to the freedoms that we do have. We've already seen so many freedoms taken away all over the state, so many rights taken away. If Roe versus Wade could get reversed, and with the Supreme Court, and these justices are very young as far as Supreme Court justices go, they could easily be in power for another 35 years. That's multiple generations that have the potential to be ruined from this Trumpism. So we have to put a hard stop on it right now. This is the opportunity. As Eminem would say, you only get one shot. And if we fail to take advantage of that this time, we may not even have the freedom to have this show 3 years from now. And that's a fact.
I have a dear friend of mine who's a Trump supporter that says that cannot possibly be true. The only people who are arresting people for saying the wrong thing are Democrats. That's really, someone really told me that, like in real life, when I
Oh,
said,
no, I believe it.
I said, I look at Trump's election as being an existential crisis to my business. I don't know if I will be allowed to operate my business as I have always done. With Trump. And he said he's like, all the stuff that you're afraid of is stuff that Democrats are doing because people are getting arrested for posting memes. It's kind of like, okay, you sent me that case. He didn't get arrested for posting a meme. He happened to post a meme. He got arrested for child pornography. That's a whole other circle of kettle of fish. And other problems. But as it was the meme that got him doxxed that came out about that is how that happened. And so yes, I mean there's a very real possibility that this whole and that's a very dark America that I don't want to live in. It's a very dark situation. I think most people don't want to live in. I did a collaborative essay with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation about Christian nationalism, and I talked about the history of Christian nationalism in this country. And they actively fight against it in the military, where it's already a huge problem. Um, and these people do not respect the various religious backgrounds of people in the military. And ironically, most of the people that call them for help are not even non-Christians. They're non-evangelical. They're from other denominations, or they're Catholic. There are other flavors of Christianity that are usually complaining about wanting to just be able to quietly practice their beliefs. And so as we were talking about, this is the last gasp. It really is, because demographically speaking, even by the next election, their agenda is not going to work. And there's not going to be enough people that still believe in those ideas, and we see this kind of already with the age divide over the situation in Gaza. I think the White House, especially, but I think everyone was a bit surprised at how, if you're, under 40-ish, sort of thing, you have a very different view of that conflict than people over 40 do. And that's very indicative of how Times are changing on a lot of these issues, and views and perspectives are changing. And I guarantee you, if that conflict had waited about a decade or so, we would be acting very differently in that situation. And that's something I think probably one of the decent points about Trump is that despite his backing of Israel and all this type of thing, he would probably handle it in a very different way that would be a little less, violent than what we have gotten. Ukraine would now be part of the Russian Federation, but who's keeping track? But it's yeah, I mean those are very different things. And so as we go through this and as we have this change of leadership and this handoff, which is beginning to happen with Nancy Pelosi moving out of leadership and Hakeem Jeffries coming in and all this stuff, as we're starting to move through this transition, by the end of this decade, we're going to really start to see the opinions of not boomers, basically, being reflected in public life. But the only way we're going to get to that place is if we keep Donald Trump out, because if we let Trump in, everyone around him, and they are so much more prepared this time, everyone around him is going to lock in their hyper-conservative, regressive view, which includes such wonderful things as banning pornography, into power essentially forever without more draconian means of revolution to get rid of it. So I would say if you, enjoy a little things like free speech, if you enjoy, being able to, have free movement and all this type of thing, then I would say, please vote accordingly in November. It is a very sad thing that we have come to this situation, unfortunately, sadly enough. But unfortunately, the the choice is this time is pretty stark. If you want to keep moving forward, then you've got to vote blue. If you don't want to move forward and you want to move to a regressive pretend past that never really existed at the time, but exists only in the minds of certain Republican voters, who basically want to quote unquote repeal the 20th century. Saw that one on Twitter a couple days ago. Then it's a pretty clear choice, for better or for worse. And this is nothing new. This has come out of the Federalist Society, the John Birch Society, the Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, objectivism, Ayn Rand philosophy, all this type of thing. This has been 60 years in the making. And now's the real inflection point. And, if we want to, have so many hard-won rights that have happened on birth control, on abortion, all of these things. And if those things matter to you, married women of America who consume the most abortions, if those things matter to you, then it's important that we try to maintain. I recently had a guy on who is this thing called the 1964 Project, and they basically want to undo everything that happened after the Civil Rights Act. And basically return to some sort of mythical past of stable nuclear families where everyone was married and teenagers didn't have sex and all this type of thing. And it's and he has funding and he has two people working for him. He's an active think tank, and he spent 2 hours on my show. His interview was so bad, it was the only time I've ever edited an episode. 215 episodes, that's the only one I've ever cut apart, ever. Because it was graphic at some moments. This is here, folks. And unfortunately, we've got to vote for the nice sleepy man from Delaware to stop it. I'm very sad that that's what things have come to, unfortunately. But sadly enough, the snooze fest from Delaware is our best hope to keep these people out of power. Do with that information and your vote in November as you will.
You couldn't have said it better. And I did see recently that he said he's going to stop all events after 8:30, so you can make sure you get his sleep. So that's a good thing. But I mean, the choice is really: do you want to step into the 2030s, or do you want to go back to the 1930s? It's really that simple, and that's where we're at.
Or in some people's cases, the 1830s. At which point, how are you guys at picking cotton? I'm a bit shit.
I have all things. I've never done hard labor in my life, and I hate the heat. So I don't think I'm plantation built. Plus, I have frozen shoulder. I'm not built for it, so I'm gonna need at least to keep things the way they are. Because let me tell you, the first whip I get, I'm like, look, I'm retired. I'm retiring. I can't
No,
take it.
I'm gonna call my white friends and be like, well, Cameron for sale, Cameron for sale. Can I interest you in myself? Like,
Just give me a nice, gentle white lady to purchase me, and I'll just sell it to you.
Wow, guys, on that
Yeah.
note, guys, you know, at first before this podcast, I made it perfectly clear I was not going to vote for any president, for anybody for president, because I'm disappointed in both of these guys of 8 years of these guys running, being in office. Biden was the president who actually implemented the vaccine mandate that cost me my job at my hospital. So I have a negative reaction to him, and of course Trump's racially divisible delivery. You know what I'm saying? Also turned me off to him as well. But hearing you guys speak about it now, I see my view clearly as independent. I am not have no affiliation to Democrat or Republican. I'm just down with which president will put more money in my pocket and make me and continue to give me a happier life. That's who I'm voting for. But unfortunately, I gotta protect my freedom. So that's most important is your freedom.
Yeah. I remember Trump is the one that allowed COVID to
Yeah.
ravage the country as he did. I think some of the policies and mandates forcing people to 6 feet up, apart and mask up and all of those, in retrospect, we see may have been a bit
Hmm.
extreme. But remember, the guy who knew it was bad and lied to the whole country, oh, it's in China, it's in Japan, or whatever he said. He's the one who let it ravage the country. So,
He asked people to start injecting bleach on national television. I mean, it's, or trying to, shine sunlight inside the body, which is not really a thing, unless you cut yourself open, sort of thing. I mean, this was his idea of a pandemic response. Yeah, and he admits in interviews and whatnot to multiple major reporters that they knew how bad it was going to be, and he just kind of chose not to do anything. I think because he didn't really know what to do, and he's not the type of person that's going to engage with experts and material to make those things happen. And so he just, I think, kind of froze, which is not the person you want in leadership in that moment. Um, And so, yeah, and not all the mandates worked, not all the precautions and mitigations worked, and some of them were genuinely terrible. And I'm very sorry that you lost your job over that. That was a story for millions of people, and I don't think that was right. Unfortunately, we are now very sadly in a situation where, like I said at the top of the show, if we want to continue in small R Republican democracy and have any say over our government in any meaningful way, and be able to continue to live our lives as we're used to, yeah, we have choices to make in November. So I hope people choose the way of what we know rather than going into some sort of white supremacist Christian nationalist future ran by Marjorie Taylor Greene and company, because that's who'll be in charge. So
Definitely. You got
it's choosing between gonorrhea and syphilis, essentially. Either way, it's going to burn.
guys.
exactly, which you got from Lauren Boebert.
Guys, it's been a pleasure having you guys on the show. Definitely, we got to call it right now. But I would love to have you guys on for a part two. I think we have a lot of things to talk about on more than this because I have a few more questions. But we'll do that another episode. Perhaps we have Joey G join us as well as my guy Matthew from Japanese Sports Show joining us as well to provide more insight than the great insight I had today from these two gentlemen right here. Of course, Marz, you've been on the podcast before. Cameron, this is your first rodeo on the TruPlayaz podcast. We keep everything blunt, truthful, credible. We're not about here. We're not here to be first. We want to be credible, and that's the most important thing on doing a podcast. So, guys, ladies and gentlemen, this is it for part two of the 6 year anniversary series. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Have a good
All
afternoon,
right.
everybody.
All right.